In this video, we would like to show you how to configure a SharePoint interface for an external database application using MatchPoint with the entity model provider. Our example is a product database. It contains detailed information on products and their manufacturers. In our scenario, we will perform 3 MatchPoint configurations. First, we will configure a model configuration file which contains the database schema. Then we will create a data grid that displays the content of the product table. And finally, we will configure a custom form which we use to display and edit entries from the product table. Okay, let's get started. On the Manage Configuration Files form, we create a model configuration file which represents a database schema. This allows MatchPoint to create all SQL queries and commands automatically. We choose Product Management as the configuration file name. Later on, we will use that name to access our entity model provider. On the root node of the configuration, we specify the database connection string. As you can see, we can also select a user that should be used for database access. Here we choose impersonated access with the application pool account. Next, we create our first entity, manufacturer. We specify the corresponding table within our database and the column that contains the primary key. We repeat this process for the product table and define the primary key here as well. Since we want to enable MatchPoint to work with the relation between products and manufacturers, we also have to specify this relation. In our case, we have a many-to-one relation. The foreign key column within the product table is the column Manufacturer ID. The primary key within the manufacturer table is the ID column. We call our relation manufacturer. The target entity is the manufacturer table, and we select the column name to be the display column. Now we add a form configuration element to the entity. Here we can specify an ASPX page we want to use as the display form for our product entries. We have already prepared this page and only have to configure a form web part that will display the entries. Within the query string, we have to specify the product ID so we can open the correct database entry. Once we save the configuration, we can immediately access the model, for instance, using the expression console. The model's variable provides access to all configured model configurations. We can access our model product management, the product entity, and even rows within the underlying database table. Now let us proceed to the second step in our scenario, the data grid. We add a grid to the page and open the configuration editor. Here we use a model data provider that accesses our model configuration. All we have to do is select the product entity from our configuration. Now we have to specify the columns for the data grid. We create a title column and use the product ID field, and a simple column for the price. Last, we add a column where we access the relation manufacturer. We save the configuration, and as you can see, the data grid works. We can view the content of the product table on our SharePoint page. Now, to finalize our example, we configure an edit form for products. If we select one of the entries from the data grid, we are able to access the display form ASPX page we have specified within the model configuration. This page is empty, and we will now create a form web part that is used to view and edit information for a database entry. We add the web part to the page and access the configuration. Then we specify the form behavior as toggle edit. This allows us to use the form both for viewing and editing data within the database. Further, we configure a model data adapter and access the product entity again. We also specify the product ID, which is available within the query string. Next, we configure the input fields of the form. Of course, we could access any column from the database, but for our example, we will only use 3 fields: a text field for the product ID, another text field for the price, and then a choice field for the manufacturer. We use an expression choice provider and access the model's expression variable. The manufacturer entity allows us to directly access all existing manufacturers. For the key expression and the text expression, we reference columns from the manufacturer table. We save the configuration and exit the page edit mode. Now you can see that we have a working form for our database entry, and we can even modify entries by selecting Edit from the ribbon. The new Entity Model Provider allows you to integrate any database application into SharePoint. You can use the model configuration to display data, for instance, in a data grid web part. Further, you can configure forms for viewing, editing, and creating database entries without writing a single line of code.